Inside covering start of session. There'll be some that'll be back and forth, so we're going to go ahead and get started. There are three of us here that are going to speak directly, and there are others that are here that can speak intelligently about various aspects of what we're doing. I'm Jim Womack. I'm with the North Carolina Election Integrity Team, and we're 1,500 strong statewide in most of the 100 counties, and our objective is free and fair elections. We're a nonpartisan 501c4 group that aims at training in all 8 lanes of election integrity. There's cards here if you're interested in what those 8 lanes are. They explain what they are, and it takes you to our QR code. It'll take you to our website so you can read up more about what the organization does. I'm going to be joined today by Jay Delancey, who is also one of our cabinet members of Insight, and he's also the head of the Voter Integrity Project, North Carolina. Jay's a very accomplished researcher and analyst in the election integrity space, and he'll talk about some of our topics today. And then I'm also joined by Carol Snow from NC Audit Force, and she's been at this a number of years as well. Very well respected in the industry, particularly for her knowledge on voter rolls and voter list maintenance and some of the problems that the state is experiencing. So I'm going to start off by turning the mic over to Jay, let him talk a little bit about some existing legislation that we'd like to see passed, as well as other topics of interest to him.
Well, how about that wolf pack? That's what I'd rather talk about. Thank you, Jim. I'm Jay Delancey, founder of Voter Integrity Project. We've been doing this for a long time. Before 2020, we were doing it. Started officially in 2011, but have been studying this issue since the early 2000s and the Bush-Gore debacle, and just realizing that who's watching the referees, because elections are managed not by the government but by people, and the people need to be watched and need to make sure people aren't trying to do anything mischievous, and that was where I got started. So what we're interested in today is, well, unless you've been under a rock, you've seen the immigration crisis we're in America. If you don't think this is a crisis, I'm sorry I can't help you, but when, according to a recent congressional study, 8.7 million people have entered the U.S. illegally since Biden undid all of the executive orders that Trump had on the books. So that's since mid-21, we've seen almost 9 million new people come in. And eventually this will force Congress to act on this notion we call birthright citizenship, whereby if any of those millions of people have a baby, those babies automatically get voting rights. And the reason that happens is because of Supreme Court rulings that have drifted from the original language and the first 30 years of the 14th Amendment language brought in. It did not allow people who were not under U.S. jurisdiction. By that it meant American Indians. They were not under U.S. jurisdiction. It also meant people who were born here but were the sons of missionaries from other countries or the sons of ambassadors. They were not granted U.S. citizenship. They were subject to the jurisdiction of their own country. And then in 1898, in a case U.S. versus Wong, the court took a Wong way. See what it did there? They went the wrong way. And the court granted citizenship. They expanded citizenship rights to say anybody born here would be a citizen. And this is, it's illegal for the courts to expand the citizenship rules based on Congress's plenary role in citizenship issues. There's a constitutional floor. There is a limit there to what Congress can do. They can't enact slavery, for example, because the 13th and 14th Amendments, but there is a floor to what Congress can do. But expanding the rights, expanding who gets to be a citizen is not within the court's purview. And the fact the courts have taken that usurpation of power has never been addressed in the federal courts. And it will be. Actually, what it will be is Congress will drive this. I don't know when. Will it be before November or after November? Well, I don't know. My money's on sooner, because more and more people are seeing this crisis and they're demanding something be done. These people should not be voting. And what we're getting at, though, is North Carolina Constitution. When this law changes at the federal level, North Carolina's Constitution will do nothing. It'll change in no way to stop people who are born here from voting, even if they're not U.S. citizens. If they're birthright citizens, they will still be allowed to vote. It's very complicated. The bottom line is there's a loophole in our Constitution, and what we want to do is require only U.S. citizens to be allowed to vote in North Carolina elections. That's the simple side of it. There is a bill that's already languishing in the Senate Rules Committee, is Senate Bill 630. We would love to see that bill dragged out and acted upon, because the time is now. We don't need to wait until after Washington does something and then we respond 2 or 3 years later after our system is even more corrupted. So we would like to see the passage of a constitutional amendment in North Carolina to grant voting rights only to U.S. citizens. That's the short of it. If you want to see the reasoning, the court order information, I have a handout I'll give you. You can look it up, and the citations are on my website at voterintegrityproject.com. Subject to questions, that's it.
Jay, talk a little bit about House Bill 770, cast vote records as well.
I may need Carol to talk about it more. This is her lane. Jim asked me to speak on House Bill 770. Were you planning to speak on that? Okay. 770 is a bill that addresses the retention of cast vote records. It's sad that we have to pass a law, because in a decent court system, and if we had the money, we would sue them because somebody broke the law when they destroyed these things. These are part of the election records that are retained. It's part of the output products from our voting machines, and it's essential to have these cast vote records in order to audit an election. It's not the be-all, end-all of election audits, but it is a first step. And right now, we don't even have that, because what I would argue, the State Board of Elections is illegally destroying these, even though all election records must be retained for 22 months after a federal election. And our State Board of Elections, they don't care. They're ignoring federal law, they're ignoring North Carolina law, and they're doing whatever they want to do. They're destroying these records. So House Bill, or is it Senate Bill?
House Bill 770.
It might be Senate Bill. I want to double check that. 770.
House 770.
Okay, he says it's House Bill 770. I'm thinking I screwed up recently.
It's sitting in the Senate right now.
It's sitting in the Senate. Okay. 770 will close that loophole and force the legislature to obey the law, maybe. I don't know what happens if they break that law too. But there's more to be said about audits of elections. That is just a first step. There's a lot more to be said about that, because the risk of machine trickeration, a scientific word, and I feel wholly unqualified to go down that lane, but I happen to have with me a computer engineer in my line.
I'm not an engineer, programmer,
Computer analyst and programmer named Carol Snow, former. Yeah, well, she has this talent stack, and we begged her. I don't know, beg's probably a strong word. We really wanted to have her speak to the whole issue of auditing elections and about anything else she wants to say.
Voterless.
Sorry?
Voterless.
Voterless. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay. And I want to hand the mic over and stop talking. This is Carol Snow of NC Audit Force.
Your favor and put it up on this, so I don't have to stand here and hold it. I've never done this before, and I'm afraid that if I hold a microphone, I'm going to shake. So,
Start here, lower.
thank you. I'm not that short. Okay, thank you. All right. So, thanks for inviting me, guys. My name is Carol Snow, and I have a little bit different message than these two do, and I have a little bit different temperament than they do, so they might want to stand away from me.
Everybody
while I
step
talk.
back.
They are more measured, they're more diplomatic, and we need people like that. And I'm not really like that. So, and my message is different because I don't understand the point of passing bills into law when the laws are not being followed right now. What is the point? A law that is not followed is not really a law, is it? We don't have any oversight. We don't have any compliance officers. No one is there to figure out whether or not, are you abiding by HB 770? Are you abiding by the law that says that you're supposed to have the social security number or the driver's license number of anyone who receives an absentee by mail ballot? Do we have anybody checking to see if that's happening? Do we have a statewide election information management system that checks to make sure that that's not happening? We don't. The answer is we don't. And that's why people like me who get irritated, because I care about our elections being legally administered. Whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or anything in between or on the other ends of the spectrum, your vote should be legally counted, and our voter registration system should be legally administered. That's what I'm all about. And I'm a Republican, but I'm more mad at the Republicans than I am the Democrats. So you can call me a partisan, but I'm more mad at my own party than I am the Democrats. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and not to bore you, but there's a reason for this story. In 1986, I graduated from the University of Nebraska at Kearney. Back then it was called Kearney State College, with a degree in math and computer science. And I went to work for Mutual of Omaha. And so all of the people coming out of the college classes, they would put you through a little class. Here's how we do it at Mutual of Omaha. Thank you for learning how to do COBOL and JCL and all that stuff, but here's how we do it here with our standards and whatnot. Okay, great. So then we get put onto the field, and onto the floor, and we start programming. Well, part of our responsibility back then, because we were brand new, we're green, let's take these guys over and put them in a testing lab, because there's other people that are working on, the one I remember was he was creating form letters with his but with his computer system. Our job was to break his system, put in wrong information, put in wrong birth dates, put in garbage, and see if my program can fix that, or if it will catch it before it gets entered. That's called data integrity. You've got to have the right data going in to your system, right? Does the statewide election information management system have those data checks in place? I see some not. Heck no, it does not. I told you this was in 1986 that I did this. The SEAM system was created, I believe, in the late 1990s. This was more than 10 years later. I'm starting to get mad. I'm sorry. This voter registration list, to me, is the most important list that this government has to manage. It determines who's eligible and who's not. It determines whether your ballot is counted correctly, or if it's, what's the word for it? Negated. Diluted by one that's not eligible. As soon as you get on the voter registration list, you're considered an eligible voter. How is it that we have people that are registered and their birth date is in 1987 or 1897? How is it that we have people who are registered and their birth date is the same year as their registration date? Who registers when they're a newborn? The system doesn't check that. These people are not stupid. Why doesn't it check that? That's what I'm asking. Why isn't it checking that? That's just the rudimentary level of data integrity. We're not even talking about whether or not they're abiding by the law or not. So here comes the Help America Vote Act of 2002, and it has a list of your statewide voter registration. This is what your computerized system has to abide by. It has to do this, 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 and this. And so their IT department should say, okay, here's what the law is. Let's make sure that our system is according to the law, right? You'd think that that's what they would want to do. Well, one of the parts of that law in Section 302, it's whether or not, or what your voter registration application should have. you should have provide either your driver's license number. If you don't have a driver's license number, provide your social security number or the last 4 digits of that. If you don't have either one of those, I'm not sure who that person would be, but if you don't have either one of those, then you can leave that blank. So back in 2004, when Section 302 went into effect, the SEAM system, which by the way, we call it the Statewide Election Information Mismanagement System in my world. I'm sorry, we're rude because we care about our votes. That system did not look at the law and go, wait a second, we shouldn't allow this application if there's no driver's license number on there. If they don't put that in there, the system should go, okay, give us a social security number. And if the user doesn't put that in there, you should have to check a box that says, no, they don't have either. And your voter registration application should match your computer system. It should be exactly the same, right? This is what the law says, this is what's required, and this is what we're going to put into our system. So since it wasn't like that, back in October of last year, we filed a Help America Vote Act, HAVA, complaint about the voter registration application. The State Board of Elections said, oh, you know what, good thing you brought that up because we were already going to fix our applications. Or, you know, it's fine that you brought that up. We were already in the process of fixing it. Okay, you're already in the process of fixing it. Why is it then that all of the applications have been corrected except for one group? Did you know that? Not all applications have been corrected. There's one group of applications that has not been corrected, and that's the applications that are not in the English language. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you say we're not compliant with the HAVA law, we're going to fix it, we're going to make it right for all of the English language, but not for the ones that are not in English language? Where, in what world does that make sense? If you want to check that out for yourself, go to dl.ncsbe.gov. Scroll down to voter registration applications, click on it. You'll see all of the application forms that they have. All of them were updated in January of this year, except for 4. Who provides oversight over the State Board of Elections? Who is that person? I don't know who that is. So now we got people like me, busybodies, who care about our elections, who care about our families, who care about our grandchildren having the right to vote in a legally administered election. We got people like me, loudmouths like me, who are saying, I'll provide the oversight. If you're not going to do it, Tim Moore, Phil Berger, if you're not going to do it, we will. Because this election system belongs to us. We the people. We decide who makes the laws. We decide who is on the county commissioner board. We decide that. It's not them. And I'm going to cross the line here. I will submit to you the reason why they don't really care that much is because this election system worked for them. It got them in the primary. It got them in the general. They're sitting there and they're going, it must be right because, oh my gosh, I'm the most popular one. And I'm saying, you know what? I don't know if you are or not. Because look at your voter registration system. So, what do you do about it? If they're not going to do anything about it, I don't think passing more laws that are going to be ignored is the right answer. I think the right answer is exposing the junk that's going on. That's one thing. The second thing is there's a citizen group out there. It's called United Sovereign Americans. And sovereign doesn't have anything to do with this sovereign citizen thing. I'm not a part of their group. I just know what they're doing. Unite, the number 4, freedom.com. They've already filed suit against the State Board of Elections in Maryland. They're fixing to go around every single state in this country that they can get the data on, and when they see that laws are being broken, they're going to file in federal court. North Carolina is on that list. If you want to be involved in that, if you want to be one of the people who's going to provide oversight over a state agency that does not abide by the law, please get in touch with them. Unite4freedom.com. They don't really want me on their team that much, I don't think, because I'm too much of a loudmouth and I'm not measured. So there you go, and here we go, Jim Womack, to clean up the mess.
Okay. We really do appreciate Carol, and let me just emphasize that in civic work that we do, and I emphasize nonpartisan civic work that we do, it's really important that you have folks. I won't call her a loudmouth. You need folks that are unfiltered, and you need that because sometimes the truth gets lost in the rhetoric. And we really need people that are honest and straightforward, that are speaking their mind and are getting passionate about these issues, because without that passion, we're not really going to see the change that we need. And we need historians and guys that have been looking at this forever, like Jay, folks that know the history of what's going on in election integrity space and that understand how laws went around. I'll give you a quick war story on Jay. I was in a debate back and forth with several legislators about the need to eliminate same-day registration in the state of North Carolina. We're the only southern state that actually has same-day registration and voting. And I was curious about the history of this. Well, Jay walked me through the whole history. It didn't even exist until like 2007 or 8. It was tried several times, but it didn't come into effect in North Carolina till the early 2000s. And then at that point, it was challenged and canceled or repealed in, I think, 2008 or 9. And then there was a court case, a court battle that went over same-day registration, early voting, and the voter ID bill.
Repealed in 2013. Yeah.
Repealed in 2013. And then, interestingly enough, it got caught in what we call the twilight zone. Jay educated me about Judge Schroeder's decision. In the Middle District Court of North Carolina, Judge Schroeder said it was okay to repeal it. But the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals came along in Virginia and said, not so fast. Racist North Carolina, it had racial overtones, and they read race into the elimination of same-day registration, the shortening of early voting and voter ID, and they put the kibosh on Judge Schroeder's decision. So we need people who understand that history, so we have the context and the perspective to go back to the General Assembly and say, okay, this got a jaded history with same-day registration, with the length of early voting, our election season of early voting, and with voter ID, and we need to be able to go back and correct those things, but we need to do them in the context of what's transpired over the years, because we don't want to waste our time and your energy correcting the law. So again, Carol's voice is very important to us. Jay's voice is very important, and now we come around to the point of the press conference, which is to discuss what our agenda is for this year. Last year, with Senate Bill 747, the General Assembly did a lot of really good things. There are 35 or 40 parts to that bill. Some of them seem innocuous, but I can tell you that they are not. They were there for a purpose and a reason. There are some things we disagreed with in Senate 747, like the removal of the authority from the political parties to open or close their primaries. That decision was made by the General Assembly without a prompting from the grassroots of either the Democrat or the Republican Party, and they believe that they should have that decision to open or close the primaries like they had historically. But aside from that, most of the rest of the parts, we believe in Senate 747, were really well intended and really well executed. Some have been challenged in court, and we're not going to get into the court deliberations today. We do believe that the provision, the one provision that was challenged, that was upheld, or I should say that was corrected by the federal district court, was the same-day registration business. And Judge Schroeder comes back around again a second time. He ruled in 13 or 16, I guess, was his decision on upholding same-day registration repeal. And now he's saying that same-day registration, as it's been reinvigorated in Senate Bill 747, is not proper because it would put an undue burden on citizens who would have to prove their registration through the mail. And we all know the U.S. Postal Service is not known for its responsiveness and its timeliness of delivering return cards to the Board of Elections. So we can understand why Judge Schroeder might have ruled that way. It is an undue burden on citizens. So our argument on same-day registration is not that we should make amends or make a path for same-day registration to occur, but rather than to cancel it altogether. Because it's a disparate treatment of the citizens of North Carolina. If you and I register 30 days in advance of the election, our address gets verified, and that's required by the National Voter Registration Act that we were supposed to do address verification. A same-day registrant gets a free pass, does not have to have his address verified. Now, how's that fair? How is that fair to the rest of the citizens who obeyed the law? It's not fair, and it's a disparate treatment of citizens regardless of their race, creed, color, origin, country of origin. It is a disparate treatment of citizens, and I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's a violation of the National Voter Registration Act of '93. I think it's also unconstitutional. I think if it's challenged in court, it'll be successfully challenged in court. And that may well happen. If our General Assembly does not take the action that's necessary to repeal same-day registration, then I dare say we may end up in court over that particular issue. We would not like to see it have to go to court because we don't think judges are the best persons to establish election law. Their job is to interpret the Constitution and to apply the law. So same-day registration has been discussed today. Another issue we talked about briefly was cast vote records, which is an existing bill, House Bill 770. House Bill 770 passed through the House last year. We thank the sponsors, Gray Mills and Ted Davis and the others, for getting that bill passed. It was a really far-reaching bill in that it would finally give us the artifacts we need to do an election audit, an effective election audit, which would build confidence with the American people that the elections were properly measured by the machines. Cast vote records are available in California. They're available in New York. They're available in Illinois. They're available in a lot of the blue states. Why is it a red state like North Carolina cannot access cast vote records for audit purposes? There's no reason. It's just because the State Board of Elections doesn't want them accessed. ES&S, the maker of the machines that are used in most of the counties around the state, already produced the cast vote records on the machines. It's just a matter of having them made available electronically to the citizens. There's no real pushback, no real issue on CVRs. It's just that we haven't done it historically, and it's difficult to get over that moment of inertia that we have. So we're hoping that 770 will move on through the Senate this short session, be passed into law, vetoed most likely by the governor, and then overridden by the General Assembly. That's a lot to do in a short period of time, but we do believe that cast vote records are an important asset. They're used in the blue states. Why aren't they used in the red states as well? North Carolina would be well served to have those CVRs. And then we have the artifacts. When you add the cast vote records with the ballot envelopes, the early voting applications, the authorizations to vote, and the poll tapes off the machines, you have all the paper and electronic artifacts that you would need in order to have an effective election audit after the election, should one become necessary. So that's same-day registration, cast vote records. Jay briefly mentioned Senate Bill 630, which has currently been introduced in the House, or I'm sorry, in the Senate. It did not move last session. It was introduced in April of last year and never really got legs during the session. I would tell you that Senate Bill 630 is important for all the reasons Jay mentioned, but also because, again, we're one of the very few states in the country that does not have a citizenship requirement in its Constitution. It does not say you have to be a citizen, a U.S. citizen. In our Constitution, Article 6 of our Constitution says you have to be either be born in or naturalized in the country in order to vote. It does not say you have to be a citizen. And I would tell you that ambiguity that's there opens the door to birthright citizenship and complicates the interpretation of the law when it's not in your Constitution. So there is a movement afoot in the country to make sure every state has a citizenship right or citizenship requirement in their Constitution, and we hope that Senate 630 will move this session, be passed into law. I can't imagine that Roy Cooper would veto that bill. I just can't imagine. Of course, he doesn't get the chance because it's a ballot initiative. So it'll actually, if they pass it through House and Senate, it'll go on the ballot this fall, and it'll be a good tool for the people to have their say about whether it should be in the Constitution or not. So that's that. Now, Carol, and again, I really appreciate Carol talking about the voter list. She didn't use numbers. Let me just amplify some things, because she's done a lot of research, a lot of very important work on the analysis of our voter rolls. There's another report that came out that's a little dated, not as accurate as Carol's numbers, called Critical Condition. It was published by the Public Interest Legal Foundation. Friend of Jay's and mine, J. Christian Adams, out of that organization, published this Critical Condition report back in 2020, and it's a very good report. It's actually on the Insight website. It's posted there for public review. It's also available at their website. You have to do a little digging to find it there, but it's a good report. It shows a lot of the vulnerabilities, exposes a lot of vulnerabilities in North Carolina and other states. In fact, that report actually shows North Carolina on the aggregate as being one of the worst states in the country for voter roll maintenance. And there's some inaccuracies maybe in the report now that are dated about non-citizen voters and that sort of thing. But I will tell you that on balance, it's a really good report, and it shows you the degree of problems that we have with felon voters that are on the voter list, with movers, people that have moved from county to county, state to state. That our voter rolls are not being maintained accurately to reflect that. So that's a good report. Carol's analysis here recently was published across the state. She's exposed the fact that since HAVA was enacted and codified, we have more than 224,000 new voters that are not HAVA compliant. 224,000. That's 5% of our voter rolls. 5% of our voter rolls do not have the verifying information that we need, either Social Security last four or driver's license information, required by federal law to have that information, and it's not in our voter rolls. It's not, when she got her public records request filled, she discovered that there's 224,000 new voters on the voter list since 2003 that do not have the HAVA required information. That's a problem, folks. That means it's very difficult to find duplicates, dead people, non-citizens and others, because the qualifying information is not there on those people. So you need that information to have a very good voter roll. Now let me take a step back and address one other very important principle. This is, again, voter list maintenance is one of our 8 lanes of election integrity. If you don't have quality voter lists, then you don't have then you have the makings of election fraud. You've created the environment for election fraud, because without an invalid voter, you can't really cheat. You really can't. In order to get an application to vote or an authorization to vote, you have to have an entry on the voter list. If you create a void on the voter list, or if you create an opportunity on the voter list with an ineligible registrant, with somebody who's duplicated or somebody that's moved, someone else can pirate that name and vote in that name. And it happens, folks. It happens. It hasn't happened as frequently in North Carolina as it does in the cities of Philadelphia and Atlanta, but I can tell you that it does happen here. Voter fraud and election fraud does exist in North Carolina. I have seen it firsthand. I have experienced it firsthand. And I can tell you that if you leave the voter lists exposed like that, they will be exploited. And when they're exploited, it'll be very difficult to prove. It'll be very difficult to go back and change it, because you only have a short window from the votes being cast to the canvass being conducted and the election being certified. And then once it's done, it's like a train wreck, folks. Think about the metaphor of a train wreck. Once it's done, everybody wrings their hands, everybody regrets the fact that the train wreck occurred, but you can't go back and undo the train wreck. Okay? Once it's done, it's done. And then the American public wants to move on to the next order of business. They don't want to go back and rehash the old election. And so, not that 2020 hasn't been rehashed a bunch of times, but I can tell you that folks don't want to go back and redo the election. They want to move on. That's the American way. And so it's so important to do it right the first time. Get the voter list right. Get the voter list corrected so that you have not exposed yourself to election fraud. And then we're a rule-following country. We're a nation of laws. And then we're obeying what federal law requires. Okay, so I saw an interesting podcast yesterday by a guy named Harry Harry. Okay, the guy who's a cybersecurity expert. Wonderful gentleman. And this podcast exposed a lot of things. He probably said it better than anybody I've ever heard, talking about the context of HAVA, the NVRA, and FIFSA. Okay, these are the 3 federal laws that govern our elections. 3. Now, we all know that the U.S. Constitution says the time, manner, and locations for elections are the providence of the states, right? The states are the ones that set their own rules and run their elections. And we really don't want the federal government intruding into our elections. However, when you look at HAVA, the Help America Vote Act of 2002, HAVA was a civil rights piece of legislation. It wasn't just a mere federal act. It was a civil rights piece of activity. We should look at it that way. Our civil rights are being violated when we're non-compliant with the HAVA law. And there's not a lot of provisions in HAVA. If you look at it, there's just a very small number of things that you have to do. One of those things is maintain your voter list. Okay? And none of the states are doing it. None of them. Not one state is the role model for voter list maintenance. Now, my friend Mac Warner, the Secretary of State of West Virginia, does a really good job of riding herd on his voter list. He's eliminated 300,000 or 400,000 ineligible registrants over the last few years. But even West Virginia still suffers from the lack of federal provisions and the federal and court cases that have prevented them from doing a full cleanup of their voter list. So even West Virginia has issues. I will say that North Carolina could become the role model for the rest of the country, because we've got a supermajority in House and Senate who really care about elections. The question is, why aren't they already doing it? Now, Carol has already espoused her views about why it's not happening, and she's right. I talk to any elected official. My brother's a congressman from Northwest Arkansas, and he was the funding authority. He is the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee that funds the Election Assistance Commission. Okay, and I had this conversation with him quite frequently. Why aren't you doing something? And he says, I don't get as excited about the election business as my counterpart from the ranking member from the Democrat Party. He is all fired up about this stuff. And I said, well, I know why, because if he can fund certain things that will help his party. I said, you're not as excited because you're in an R+25 district. You're getting elected. The election is working for you, okay? You're not as excited, but you should be, because our country is at stake. Truly, our country is at stake. If the citizens don't trust their elections, if the citizens don't believe that their vote is not being diluted, that it's counted, if they don't believe that it's counted, they will stop voting. And when they stop voting, then we've lost it all. Because when people stop voting, then the country gets run by whoever installs their elected officials. Okay. So I would just tell you, it is important. More than 50% of the American voting public, does not trust the election outcomes. They don't. And all because they don't trust the 8 lanes of election integrity. They either think the machines are corrupted, or they think that the absentee ballots are out of control, or the voter lists are corrupted, or that the election officials aren't doing their jobs. There's a combination of factors that they believe, but they don't believe their elections are honest, or that they're measuring correctly the outcomes that were the citizens intended. And if they don't trust them, then we're one step already towards anarchy and tyranny in the country, because they don't trust the elections. So there are a number of things that we're advocating for this session that we think will be very important. They're in a flyer that we have, and everybody's welcome to pick up one of these today. One of the things that we've heard that's a popular idea is the the shortening of early voting period. We think it's very costly and not necessary. I mean, there are days where you can go to the polls and you can sit there for an hour and nobody comes to vote. That's a classic waste of taxpayer dollars. Shortening the early voting period down to somewhere between 7 and 10 days, the American public wants that. If you look at polling from Rasmussen, it says they think that 7 to 10 days is about right. We're doing 17 days in North Carolina. We're not as bad as Virginia. Virginia does 45 days of early voting. It's an election season up there. So North Carolina would be well served to drop it back to 7 to 10 days. It would be more affordable to the counties who are having to fund the elections to go to 7 to 10 days. I think there's some interest in doing that this session. The second item is the elimination of same-day registration. Folks, I got to tell you, it's opening Pandora's box to have same-day registration, and the courts are even conflicted about whether it's legitimate to do it the way we do it. So we need to eliminate same-day registration and get compliant with both federal law and the Constitution by making sure that everyone's treated the same when they register. Everyone. The third item is student identifications. because of the way voter ID has been implemented, and with all the allowances for students and for other individuals who don't have the ability to get an ID with reasonable impediment. Because of that, we've opened up the window for all kinds of crazy identification forms being used. And I think that's gotten out of control, frankly. There are student IDs that can easily be fabricated or cloned or created. It's as easy as creating a fake power bill. We got a lot of loopholes in the ID area, and that needs to be tightened up. And I think tightening up the student IDs that are approved, and going to electronic IDs certainly should not be allowed. The State Board of Elections has indicated that they're moving in that direction, that sooner or later they're going to allow electronic IDs to be used. And I got to tell you, I just don't think that the control mechanisms are there. You need a hard copy identification. I mean, could you imagine showing an electronic ID to the state trooper when he pulls you over? I think he's going to want to see your driver's license. And I think that's where we probably need to be in our elections right now if we really want to trust them. So student IDs is another area. Voter registration lists, there are some things that can be done to really tighten up those lists. And the General Assembly, I think once they're educated about it, they'll want to go along. One thing that I just learned recently, the state of North Carolina is one of the few states that does not link to the Electronic Verification of Vital Events, EVE database. We're one of the few states in the country that does not do that. Even the blue states link to EVE. And the reason they do is because people need to be able to get replacement birth certificates or to be able to prove that they were born where they say they were born. That EVE system is really important, and it's not costly. It's actually very easy to interface to. And we're one of the few states that doesn't do it. If someone says, I'm a citizen of North Carolina, or I'm a citizen of the United States, and they check the block on the voter registration form, you can't prove it. You can't prove it. They can say whatever they want to say up there. And and the courts have said you can't prove it. But you know what? You can do a lookup into EVE, and you can validate whether that person was born on that date in that city, in that state. You can do that. It's not costly. It's easy to do, and most of the states are doing it. Why isn't North Carolina? We should be linking to the EVE database as part of our registration process. And then people that want to lie, then it'll probably stop people from faking or claiming where they were and illegally or improperly. So the EVE database is one of the very many things. As Carol pointed out earlier, we've got a very substantial number of felons, non-citizens, deceased persons, and mostly duplicates and movers on our voter list. And we need to get that voter list cleaned up. If we can get that voter list down to where it was 98 or 99% accurate, it would close the door to most forms of election fraud. And then the citizens would, I think, would trust the outcomes better. Okay, another area is in the audit space. And I can tell you that now that none of the states, not one of the 50 states, has got an election integrity audit or I should say an audit, either post-election or during election, that gives them confidence in election integrity. And the only way we're ever going to get there is through a comprehensive set of audits done by an independent third party. It can either be a commercial or a governmental agency. And in our opinion, we think the state auditor is the right place to do it. We elect a person to be an independent mind to go audit various agencies. The State Board of Elections is the fox guarding the chicken coop. The State Board of Elections should have to stand audit to an independent third party that says you're following the law or not following the law. Here are the things that need to be corrected in order to get in compliance with the law. Every other state agency is subject to the auditor's review, except the State Board of Elections. State Board of Elections should have to stand an audit, and and the state auditor that we elect, we the people, when we elect a state auditor, that person ought to have the ability to go in and inspect and certify that what they're doing is in compliance with the law, number one, and two is state law and federal law. And they should be doing that, and we need to give them that authority, the state auditor, enumerated in the statutes. And then we should also make sure that they're resourced to do it correctly. So you have machines and technology audit. You have procedural audit so that everybody's complying with the law. You have a voter list audit that says here's how well we're doing against the state, the federal requirements. And then a post-election tabulation audit that measures how well we did in terms of the accuracy of the count. And so that series of 4 audits that would be performed under the guidance of the state auditor would make a huge difference. And we're hoping to get some movement in that direction this session. And the last item is vote by mail. And I can tell you with absolute confidence that there was manipulation and exploitation in the 2020 election. We saw it again in the 2022 cycle around the country in various places. Not as serious in North Carolina, but still occurs here. I have personally seen absentee ballot fraud in my county. I have personally observed it. I've discovered it. It was going on for years in my county, and I discovered it when I was running for office back in 2010. It goes on in North Carolina where it's permitted, where it's not inspected, it's neglected. It's the old Army saying, right? If it's not inspected, it's neglected. Well, we don't really check for absentee ballot fraud. It is the one unobserved, unchecked method of voting in the state of North Carolina. And we have got a lot of room for growth in putting checks and balances on absentee by mail voting. And that, by the way, is where most of the election fraud, where it did occur, that's where it occurred in 2020 and 2022. We know of several states where absentee ballots, where there was ballot stuffing that were going on, where there was a lack of checks, lack of controls, a loss of chain of custody. A lot of those activities occurred in 2020. Now, I did not say I'm not an election denier, okay? I did not say that I believe the 2020 election was stolen, because I don't like that word stolen. I think to say that we certainly know there was exploitation, we certainly know there was abuse and neglect, and if that shaped the outcome, then you can conclude what you want. I do believe that it had a major impact. That and FISA, I should say CISA or CISA mismanagement and exploitation of information in 2020, 2022, and ongoing to this day is a problem as well. But the absentee by mail is where most of the election fraud occurred, where it occurred. And in order to tighten that up, we've got to really tighten up our controls. And one of those things that's easy to do that would really help us with that form of election fraud is observation. We put poll observers looking at every other aspect of this election, in-person voting. We don't do it on absentee by mail. There should be a poll observer or equivalent at every one of those Board of Election meetings where the board is reviewing the ballot envelopes, the container return envelopes, or able to inspect those envelopes for completeness and accuracy, or to make a note of anything that's irregular and say that, and then be able to do a voter challenge. As of right now, we're not allowed to look at the absentee by mail envelopes, which are essentially the same information as on the authorizations to vote or the early voting application. So we should be able to have access to those ballot envelopes before the ballots are removed and counted, just like we would in-person voting. If we treat that the same, then it'll be a uniform treatment of all voters, and I'll be a lot more confident that the absentee by mail is not being manipulated in the way that it is elsewhere. So that's it, folks. We'll take questions. I think the legislature is predisposed to want to help us out this time, and we certainly are looking forward to working with them through this session.
One last action item.
Yeah.
Keep Stein out of
Well, I'm a nonpartisan on that case. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Kyle, producer.
Yeah, Kyle.
Just wanted to ask for you or for Carol, I just wanted to ask your reaction to the HAVA hearing from the other week when the state board went through all of the potential duplicates and had explanations for them.
I'll defer to Carol. She's the expert on that one.
Because they had some of them that were like father-son that had the same name.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about whether or not there were double ballots cast by those duplicate registrations. I gave them examples, 7 examples from all of the double ballot lists that we have. I didn't give them all of the double ballots they look like they're double or triple ballots. Last year we gave them one of the triple ballots. It was out of Halifax County. Don't know if you knew this or not, but when the pre-registrations, the people who are 16 and 17 years old, they register before they're 18, they go into a queue, right? And then once they turn 18 or a little bit before 18, they get fed into the system. There's something wrong with that where one person will get, maybe if they go to the DMV more than one time, or maybe they also registered at school or something, they'll get put into that queue multiple times. We've seen as many as one 18-year-old will have as many as 3, one time had 4 registration numbers under her name. So, okay, does the State Board of Elections or does the County Board of Elections, does it catch that? The answer is no. And in fact, there was one, I'm sure this girl has no idea that 3 ballots were cast in her name in the 2020 election during early voting. So there it is. It's 3 IDs, boom, 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 in consecutive order. That was sent over to the Election Oversight Committee and also to the State Board of Elections, and their response was, oh, oops, that was a mistake. She didn't vote 3 times. She only voted once. How do you know? How did you reconcile? If you say you've got 50,000 people who voted in your county, where are your 50,000 people? Where are your 50,000 registration or your registration records and your voter history records? You just took 2 away. Now you're even more off balance than you were to begin with. And speaking of ballot reconciliation, did you know that in 2020 there were 25 counties who did not complete their ballot reconciliations before that election was certified 3 weeks later? That was over 1 million people, 1 million registration records, 1 million ballots where they weren't sure whether or not they had the right number of ballots for the right number of people. Those are voter history. That's a voter history audit is what it's called here, but in other states it's called the ballot reconciliation. It's supposed to be finished before you certify your election. How can you certify some? When you're in banking, you reconcile. When you're in business, you reconcile. You make sure everything is right. How in the world can you not make sure that you have the right number of voters for the right number of ballots before you certify an election? How did we get to this point?
Anything else?
I gotta head
Okay,
out.
all right. Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming out.
What about the North Carolina having more ballots cast than the population?
I don't know that that's the case. She asked whether or not the number of ballots cast more than the eligible voting population, and I don't know that that's the case.
I was told that North Carolina is one of 9 states.
I'd have to go back and check with that. I don't know that we had more ballots cast than eligible voters in the state. I don't think that's the case. I think, but one thing that I would bring up, that when Jim was talking about the number of people who don't have Social Security number or driver's license number, he said the number is 224,000. That is true. That is where they registered since January of 2004. That's when HAVA went into effect, right? What about everybody who registered before 2004? How many of those don't have Social Security or driver's license number on their records? That answer is over 200,000. So we're really talking about 423,000. We're not talking about just 223,000. Now, does HAVA require that you go back and get that information from those people? No, they don't. But HAVA is the minimum requirement. It's the minimum. They tell the state legislatures, look, if you want to make this more, more stringent, you can do that. You have the ability to do that. They could go back and require all that information from everybody who registered before 2004. Will this legislature do it? I doubt it. I'm doubting Thomas. Anybody else? Any other questions? I'm tired of hearing myself talk.
Okay, anybody else got anything? We're going to close it out. We're actually, because we've got a conflict with the General Assembly's timing. They gavelled in at the same time we started this meeting, and a lot of the media are on the inside. So we're gonna stay out here for another hour or so, and in fact we expect to have CBS 17's coming out. We got 2 or 3 other news outlets that are inside covering session that are come out here to get a post press conference quick take on what we talked about, and we'll hang around for them. But for now, this is it for our press conference. Hopefully we covered a lot of the things. I see Joanne.
I want to add one thing.
Yeah, okay. Joanne's back there. I want Joanne to say a few words about some of the work that she's done on both the voter registration form and some of the other initiatives that we've got pending. And then Jay's got one more thing he wants to add as well. Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to put this camera back over to where, if Joanne speaks, I'd like her to stand where you're standing instead of just so the camera will be. Look, May 22nd. If you could come back, plan to come back, we would love to have you. That'll be a legislative day of action where we will be in this area, and Sue has more to say about it, but she's not going to. We're going to be meeting here from 10 till 2 on that day. That's the plan. We'll equip you, we'll give you maps, we'll give you whatever you need to be able to go in and practice the art of citizen lobbying, if you will, but we're not lobbying because we're not paid for it and we don't need a certificate to do it. But okay, so May 22nd, that's a Wednesday, right? I believe it is. Joanne, he called you out.
We have been working on the application for voter registration a little bit more. The State Board of Elections did make some concessions, but there's also many other items on the form that they're calling optional, which once again is inconsistent with HAVA. And it would help to, again, verify people if more of that information were available. There's also exceptions in the section on the contents of the application where it gives excuses for people not to have to submit the information that is required. So I'm hoping that if we can get the information on the front end correct, there won't be so many voters that have been put on the rolls that should not have been put on the rolls. Because the way the application process works now is you are given the application. If it's incomplete, the State Board of Elections can attempt to contact you. Of course, the phone number is not required, so unless you just happen to put your phone number, there's no way that it can contact you. But they allow you to amend that application up until the, I'm forgetting what you call well, in other words, right before the, after the election, there's a period, canvass date. So you can submit voter application information up until the canvass date. So that has been going on for how many months? Forever. And it seems to me that the application process should have a defined time frame, that they are allowed to get information. Maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 60 days, to determine whether that person is eligible to vote or not eligible to vote. Because they're staying on with their application. It looks like the application is pending. And why should it last for all that amount of time? So there's more things in that section on the contents of the application that really need to be looked at and cleaned up so that we don't have more people entered erroneously on the rolls. Thanks.
Okay, folks, I think that's it. We're going to close it out now, and we'll remain behind for some other media types to come out of the General Assembly here this afternoon. But thanks for coming out. Appreciate y'all joining us today.
Thank you.